Good day. In 1977, science fiction was changed forever with the release of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. The movie went on to become one of the most popular and influential movies of its time. It garnered 2 sequels, Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, and Episode 6, The Return of the Jedi. Unfortunately, we did not get a sequel trilogy. What we got was a prequel trilogy, which in my opinion was somewhat unnecessary. But prior to the prequel trilogy, the Star Wars saga was continued in novel form, in the guise of Star Wars Heir to the Empire. Now, this novel was written by Timothy Zahn, who after this novel went on to become a prolific writer of Star Wars. So with that being said, let's take a closer look at Heir to the Empire. This really has to be one of the best book covers I have seen in a long time. Not only does it generate a considerable amount of interest, it also shows you what some of the characters look like. In the lower left, we get a very well-drawn picture of Grand Admiral Thrawn, and this being made prior to TIE Fighter was the only time we actually saw what he really looked like. In the very center, we get a very domineering picture of Joruus C'baoth with little laser beams coming out of his hands. Really, the rest of the pictures are pretty stock. It's just some basic stormtroopers here, Leia from Endor here, and just Han looking somewhat dazed. Also, Chewie looks a little anorexic, somewhat similar to Jedi Academy. So let's crack this thing open and take a look at Star Wars Heir to the Empire.
The novel begins, appropriately enough, on the bridge of a Star Destroyer. Now, in every film of the original trilogy, after the text crawl, it goes to a shot of a Star Destroyer moving through space. The first character we are introduced to is Captain Pellaeon. Pellaeon is the epitome of the professional soldier, although in the Empire's case one could not simply classify him as a member of the Old Guard, because if that were the case he would certainly not have survived as long as he has. However, he is one of those types of officers that is strict about military discipline. The first thing that we actually see Pellaeon do is dress down a lieutenant that simply yelled an update to him.
It is from Pellaeon that we learn the time period in which the events of this novel are taking place. It had been 5 years since the Battle of Endor, and the Empire itself has shrunk to a mere 1/4 of its former size.
Later, we are introduced to Grand Admiral Thrawn. This occurs when Pellaeon is summoned to Thrawn's command room. Prior to entering, Pellaeon is accosted by Thrawn's bodyguard, a Nogri named Ruka. This sort of becomes a running joke. Whenever Pellaeon goes to see Thrawn, Ruka always likes to scare him. Now, Ruka is a member of the Nogri species, and this species is extremely deadly when it comes to the art of assassination. And the species themselves does look rather scary. So after that bit of humor, Ruka lets Pellaeon in. As you can see, Thrawn is not a human. He is a member of a near-human species called the Chiss. In the Imperial hierarchy, he is known as a Grand Admiral, which is about the highest rank that you can aspire to in the Imperial military. In addition to being the Supreme Commander of the Imperial fleet, he is also the leader of the Imperial government. When Pellaeon enters Thrawn's command room, he is at first taken aback by the fact that there are sculptures and various bits of art all throughout the room.
This is Thrawn's claim to fame. Apparently, he is able to understand and exploit the weakness of a culture simply by studying their art. Now, at first glance, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But as the novel series progresses, it will. I don't know how it does, but he is able to make it make some sort of sense.
Pellaeon and Thrawn discuss a recent mission, and art of all things. During their art conversation, we get the first example of time dating in Star Wars. And it should come to everyone's complete lack of surprise that this time dating is never brought up again outside of the Thrawn Trilogy. The art conversation is cut short when some New Republic forces attack.
rebels easily win the battle due to Thrawn's art divinations. Apparently, Thrawn was able to determine that the individual leading the New Republic task force was an Elam, and apparently members of this species psychologically cannot handle the tactic called Mark Sable, and using this tactic, Thrawn is able to counter any of their moves. Now, as the chapter ends, Thrawn tells Pellaeon that he now has the coordinates for a planet called Wayland, and possibly the planet called Yutani, but that's only conjecture at this point. And the chapter ends with Thrawn and Pellaeon going to a planet called Heir. They're going there first to pick up a lizard that is able to use force-repelling bubbles.
After that exciting first chapter, we cut to Luke talking to Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Why is it that Luke hasn't figured out that Ben is a fake name by now? I mean, seriously, does he think it's his middle name? Does he think it's his first name? I mean, seriously, his name is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Not Ben Obi-Wan Kenobi, not Obi-Wan Ben Kenobi, just Obi-Wan Kenobi. What is so hard to figure out about that? To make matters worse, he names his son Ben. I mean, seriously, Ben? Why would you name your son after your mentor's fake name? Anyway, Obi-Wan contacts Luke mainly to say he can't contact him anymore, and he does allude to some things that are going to take place in the future. But basically, this is all he says. Luke, you're going to meet some people, and some stuff is going to happen. You know, I think all of these seers secretly work for the publishing company. They tell you just enough to not really tell you anything.
In any event, Chapter 2 details what has happened to our core characters and the Rebel Alliance. Luke has since become a Jedi Master and has undertaken an attempt to train Leia. Leia has of course married Han and is currently pregnant with twins. She is currently the New Republic's main diplomat. Han has resigned his general's commission and is currently trying to hire smugglers in order to ease the New Republic's shipping difficulties. The Rebel Alliance has since grown into the New Republic, and its government has gone from its emergency military roots to a more bureaucratic form. This, of course, has the downside of making things more political, and thus bringing forth political infighting. All told, the New Republic is one of the more powerful governing bodies in the galaxy. Chapter 3 introduces two new characters. Talon Karade, an individual that looks somewhat like Hawk Fu from the Jackie Chan adventures. He currently controls the most powerful smuggler organization in the galaxy. He is a tough but fair businessman who is at this point a neutral party and somewhat of an anti-hero. And finally, we have Mara Jade. She is Talon's right-hand man, so to speak. She is tough, independent, and force-sensitive. In addition, she has an undying hatred for Luke. Don't we all? I suppose this hatred could, at this point anyway, be considered dramatic irony, because later on Luke and Mara will marry and conceive a child that is incorrectly named Ben. But of course, at this time, no one knew that, and none of those books were written yet. When we last left our antagonists, they were en route to a planet called Heir. They were going to this planet to retrieve an animal called a Yesalama or a Yesama, or however you pronounce the name. I think I'm just going to call it a Force Lizard. Well, this beast is able to project what is called a Force Bubble, which effectively negates a Force user's ability.
The Force Lizard is a sessile creature, meaning that it doesn't really move. This proves to be advantageous because all Thrawn really has to do is hook it up to a nutrient feed and then mount it various places. Now, he also has a number of back racks commissioned so that individuals can be protected by the Force Lizard's anti-force field.
After Thrawn procures the creatures, he heads to a planet called Wayland. He goes to that planet to reactivate one of the Emperor's storehouses. Not being a standard buffoonish Imperial, he already has planned for the fact that there's going to be a Dark Force user there, hence the need for the Force-repelling lizards. When Pellaeon and Thrawn land on Wayland, they encounter this Dark Force user, a Dark Jedi named Joruus C'baoth. Now this is a clone of a Jedi Master that died prior to the Clone Wars. Now, he was rather demented in his original form, and as a clone he is completely insane. Also, Joris is pronounced Joris instead of just Joris. A fairly strange way of differentiating the two. I mean, what if he didn't have a U in his name? Also, he looks somewhat like a demented Santa Claus. The first thing he does after a short introduction is try and kill them.
This, of course, is the exact reason why Thrawn procured the Force Lizards, as dealing with Dark Jedi is generally hazardous to your health. In addition, Thrawn needs Saboth's ability to use battle meditation. Now, what battle meditation is, it's a force power that allows you to increase the cohesion and overall fighting effectiveness of a military force. That's why, after the Battle of Endor, the Imperial fleet just sort of collapsed, and the Empire itself just broke apart into different warlord factions.
Thrawn is able to bribe Saboth into working for him by offering to capture Leia, and by extension her onboard Jedi twins. So in addition to Saboth, Thrawn also brags that he was able to procure a prototype cloaking device and a trivial bit of technology as well.
Now, these cloaking devices are prototypes. They're not very good prototypes at that. While your enemy can't see you, you don't know where you are either, because you can't see out. Somewhat similar to the cloaking device in Space War, if I'm not mistaken. Now, there's only one problem with this. This is supposed to be the Emperor's super secret storehouse. And if that's the case, why not have the schematics for, I don't know, cloaking devices that actually work? Now, Thrawn is able to use these cloaking devices to great effect.
Now, our Magnificent Three are now on a planet called Bimasari. It is here that they are attacked by Nogri dispatched by Thrawn. They are able to easily fight them off due to some timely assistance by Chewbacca.
Now, this becomes a recurring event all throughout the story. Nogri attack, and our magnificent heroes slaughter them all. It seems that both Luke and Leia know how to use battle meditation, as the Nogri suffer a 20-point IQ drop whenever they face them.
It's not that they can't hit anything, it's just that they're being forced to miss. On the Imperial side of things, Thrawn readies his troops for his prelude to his campaign on the shipyards at Tulis Van. These prelude attacks are going to use a different type of attack called the Hit and Fade. A Hit and Fade attack is where a small number of ships attack a target for a short amount of time and then retreat. The rebels have been using this for quite some time, but for the most part the Imperials just did this. For the Empire! To the last, men! In addition to tactical expediency, the hit and fade tactic is used for political reasons as well. Thrawn uses these small-scale attacks to make the New Republic look weak and ineffectual.
That's the one thing about this war. It's fought both in the political arena and on the battlefield. Now, the New Republic and the Empire are somewhat equal to one another. So if one side can be made to look weak, then that's just one step closer to the victory.
After the kidnapping attempt on Leia, Luke heads to Dagobah to try and see if he can find any Jedi materials in Yoda's hut. Why he didn't do this earlier is anyone's guess. Meanwhile, Han and Leia decide to visit Lando at his new business establishment.
Lando's new venture is called Nomad City.
In addition to being shaped like a giant shoe, Nomad City is a mobile mineral processing station. The reason that is mobile is due to the ultra-hot sun of the Niklon system. The sun also makes it hard to reach the city itself, so Lando had to have this constructed. This has got to be one of the coolest designs for a starship I've seen in quite some time. The ships function like giant umbrellas, and they are designed to ensure that Nikon's sun does not come into contact with ships traveling in system. When Han and Leia arrive, they are greeted exactly as they were in Empire Strikes Back.
This is another recurring element in the story. All of the characters and some of the situations allude back to the original trilogy, and while it is nice, I suppose, it does wear thin after a while.
Well, 2 seconds after arriving in system, the Imperials attack. They don't do too much damage, but they do end up capturing a number of machines called Mole Miners. This machine will become important later. After the Imperials leave, Luke, who had rejoined Han and Leia after his fruitless search at Dagobah, joined together with Lando in an attempt to come up with a plan for securing Leia.
They actually come up with a fairly decent plan. They're going to modify C-3PO to sound like Leia, and thus make him even more effeminate than he already is. And then they're going to use him as a decoy. They're going to put C-3PO, Han, and Lando on the Falcon, and then they're going to put Chewie and Leia on Lando's ship, the Lady Luck. What they're then going to do is make it seem like Leia is on the Falcon, and then they're going to have Leia hired out on Chewie's homeworld as Kashyyyk. Well, the plan is pretty solid. The only problem is Thrawn is able to see through it in about, 6 seconds, and is able to track down the Lady Luck.
Luke, on the other hand, decides to follow up on a rumor about a Jedi Master.
This, of course, is a trap set by Thrawn. While Luke is en route to the planet that is supposed to harbor this Jedi Master, he is pulled out of hyperspace by an immobilizer cruiser.
This ship is fairly rare in the Imperial Remnant fleet. It's designed to pull starships out of hyperspace by using what is called a gravity well projector.
When Luke is pulled out of hyperspace, Thrawn's Star Destroyer is waiting for him, which immediately captures his X-Wing with the tractor beam. Luke is able to escape this by using a rather unorthodox tactic. He reverse triggers his acceleration compensator. Now, why he wasn't immediately turned into pink goo is anyone's guess. I would imagine he had some sort of force power for that. Because when there's force powers that let you walk backwards to go back in time, anything is really possible where the Force is concerned.
After Luke escapes, Thrawn is less than pleased. He goes down to the tractor section to confront the individual that let Luke escape.
Villains all hate failure, and yet they are all quite good at it. And that's because they always kill anyone who fails. Instead of, doing the intelligent thing and letting them learn from their mistakes, and thus being able to more easily counter similar strategies in the future. I mean, think about this. You have to replace this guy you just killed, you have to spend time, you have to spend money, and usually the replacement is nowhere near as good as the guy you just killed.
However, in this case, Thrawn kills the tractor operator simply because he refused to admit his mistake, which is still pretty stupid. But this type of interesting violence is rather rare when Thrawn is concerned. In any event, Thrawn breaks off his pursuit of Luke because he knows that Luke's maneuver will leave him stranded, and decides to outsource Luke's capture. He then continues preparing for the Sluis van operation.
Luke is now stranded literally in the middle of nowhere, with limited supplies, no hyperdrive, and no comm system. He does try his hand at being MacGyver, but is unable to patch up the hyperdrive. He is able to figure out a way to fix the comm system, but it will take too much time for him to fix it, so he puts it off on R2. With that, he goes into a Jedi hibernation trance.
Meanwhile, Leia arrives at Kashyyyk, and absolutely nothing happens. Although, she does catch a glimpse of an ogre, but they don't actually find it.
Luke is later found by Talon Karrde. Karrde, being neutral, simply stuns and imprisons him.
And here is where Luke meets Mara Jade. At this point, Mara Jade is a very annoying character. She hates Luke, and I really can't hold that against her. But the problem is that she expresses her hatred in the most juvenile manner possible. Really, you could replace all of her dialogue with incessant whining and it would be about the same. Here's a good example of a conversation between the two.
You found my X-Wing. I thank you. Save your gratitude. Nice compound you have here.
I say we grease this rat fuck son of a bitch right now.
Anyway, the final nail in the coffin is she carries around his lightsaber as if it was some sort of trophy. All you did was shoot him in the back with a stunner. That's not something to be proud of.
And here we come to the point where three of the plot threads really converge on one another. This occurs when both Han and Thrawn go to Talon Karrde's base at pretty much the same time. Also, Luke escapes about the same time that Thrawn arrives, thus bringing all of this to a head.
Prior to Thrawn's arrival, Luke was moved to a utility shed so that he would not be detected by Thrawn. This proves to be a rather idiotic move, as the method of locking him into the shed consisted simply of shooting the door controls. In addition to that, they put him in the shed right next to R2-D2.
Now this is Talon Karrde we're talking about. He's supposed to be the most intelligent smuggler chief in the galaxy. Now why would he do something so monumentally stupid and half-assed as this? And you have to remember, Luke can't use the Force because of all the Force lizards. But I think I know what power he was using. Plot convenience.
In all fairness, this is necessary to keep the story from bogging down. In other books, Luke's capture would slow the plot down to a crawl, and generally it would be highly annoying.
Luke is able to escape in a very MacGyverish manner. he uses the power cell from his bionic hand to power the door and thus open it. Now, while that's fairly ingenious, it's nothing compared to this.
Luke escapes with R2-D2 and steals this spaceship. It does seem rather foolish of Karade to leave his starships fully fueled and unlocked, but then again, I am not a high-caliber smuggler.
Mara gives chase in the second starship, but Luke, being the inept drone that he is, ends up crashing his ship while attempting to shake Mara. This causes Mara to crash as well. I guess Luke's foolishness is contagious.
While the chase was rather exciting, it was actually rather foolish, as Thrawn's ship was in orbit at the time. This, of course, makes Thrawn suspicious. But, lucky for Karade, this suspicion only amounts to him leaving a small detachment of stormtroopers. Now, Thrawn's main objective with Karade is to try and procure a number of capital ships. This, of course, ties in with the trivial piece of technology that he found on Wayland. Back at Luke and Mara's crash site, they prepare to enter the jungle. And this is where Mara's character gets all the more annoying. At first, she wants to simply shoot Luke in the head. Then, once Luke convinces her not to kill him, she wants to kill R2. Seriously, who would want to kill R2-D2? He's the only remotely useful person there. Anyway, Luke is able to save R2 and himself, and our unlikely trio head into the jungle.
You lose it here, you're in a world of hurt.
On Kashyyyk, Leia is attacked by the Nogri once again. They are easily driven off, but Leia is able to take one alive, because that particular Nogri was able to recognize Leia as being the daughter of Darth Vader due to her scent.
Oh, you must smell like feet wrapped in leathery, burnt bacon.
Yeah, I guess the shower had been out for quite some time by that point. Anyway, after this revelation, Leia is able to strike a deal with the surviving Nogri to meet at Endor. And after that, Leia departs Kashyyyk.
We return again to Luke and Mara's trek through the jungle, and it is here that she finally tells him why she despises him so much.
Mara Jade was an Emperor's hand, a secret agent so secret that nobody outside of the Emperor knew of her existence, meaning that she had no resources to call upon after he died. Now, before the Emperor died, she was charged with killing Luke. She was going to do this at the Sarlacc pit by making certain that he did not get his lightsaber. But really, he probably could have just used the Force kick on everyone and still won. So basically, Mara Jade hates Luke simply because he's alive. Now, how that is supposed to engender any sympathy is just completely beyond me. And what is Luke supposed to say to that? Yeah, I'm totally sorry I'm still alive. Next chance I get, I'll walk out an airlock.
Luke and Mara make it out of the jungle alive, and are able to fool the Imperials into believing that Mara is the captive. Although when you look at Mara and then you look at Luke, it's rather hard to believe that Luke could capture anybody. Well, due to this, they are able to keep their identities secret.
Mara and Luke later meet up with Han, who informs them that an attack is going to take place. It is during this small skirmish that Luke finally lives up to his Jedi reputation and engages in a QuickTime event.
Using his lightsaber, Luke is able to cut a pillar holding up a large arch. In doing so, he causes it to collapse on the attacking Imperials. After the excitement on Mycura comes to a close, Han, Luke, and Lando just so happen to go to the Sluis Van shipyards at the same time that Grand Admiral Thrawn launches his assault. It looks like no one in this book has a good sense of timing.
The main goal of this attack is to secure warships. The way they do this is they use mole miners filled with soldiers to bore into the bridge section of these warships and then capture them.
The plan works fairly well, only Thrawn did not take into account that the mole miners had remote overrides. Since the mole miners were stolen from Lando, he has a code that allows him to take control of the mole miners. A pretty big oversight for someone of Thrawn's caliber.
Unfortunately, their options are rather limited. So what they do is opt for a scorched earth policy. They lock the mole miners on so that they will destroy the bridge controls, thus denying Thrawn his ships, but in turn, these destroyed controls make the ships useless for New Republic use.
For Thrawn and the Imperials, this is half a victory. They didn't get the ships, and they lost the mole miners, but they did succeed in crippling a large number of New Republic ships. Really, the battle was an unexpected success and failure for the Imperials. After the Battle of Sluis Van draws to a close, we finally reach the dreaded to be continued. Thankfully, Heir to the Empire is fairly self-contained and nothing is left hanging.
Heir to the Empire can easily be considered one of the best Star Wars Expanded Universe novels. And that's mainly due to its great pacing. There are so many points in this novel where it could just bog down and the plot could slow to a crawl. In addition, it does a great job generating suspense. And by the time you reach to be continued, you want that sequel. You want to go pick it up the same day. This is what I like to call a 3 o'clock read. You want to know what happens, and you will read it until 3 a.m. Now for next time, I am going to be reviewing Dark Force Rising. But for now, this is GeneralLotz wishing you good Darksaber, good Vector Prime, or whatever makes you happy.